Welcome to Keep Calm and Carry On, which is our 2 evenings of webinars for those who are running groups for children within the URC and beyond, particularly for our Pilots and FOFA groups. My name is Lorraine Webb and I'm the Programme Officer for Children and Youth Work for the United Reformed Church. But prior to that, my experience was in mainstream teaching and also special school teaching and respite care for children with additional needs. There's no way that I can condense all my years of learning because I was learning right up to the moment that I left and beyond. I can't condense all of that into 2 hours, so I apologise. This will be a whistle-stop tour, a snapshot of things which you may come across within your groups. There's bound to be loads of extra questions, and please feel free to be in touch or to ask for further training. Let's keep calm and carry on. And I want first of all to think about inclusion and belonging. Not just fitting in, but truly belonging. And I'd like you to think for a moment about a time when you didn't feel that you belonged. Think it through and think what would have made a difference for you. I'm sure most of us have been in situations where we felt a little bit out of it. So, what does belonging look like? I wonder if you came up with any of these. People know my name and greet me with it. People remember what I've told them about my life. I hate it if I go somewhere and I've already told somebody, for example, that I live with my partner and I have 2 children, grown up, and then they ask me whether I have a significant other or whether I have children. I feel confident and familiar with what happens. I understand what is going on and feel part of it. I have a role to play. People recognise my strengths and use them. And people accept me just as I am. And this is true for all of us, but for children with additional need, there may be extra barriers that make it difficult. Those barriers may come from their environment. Is that room suitable for them to be in? If they have problems with flashing light, for example, does the room have neon lights that are uncovered, or does it have a gentler form of light that doesn't flash? Are there stairs that they can't get up? Is the equipment that we use not suitable? For example, lots of play parks don't have accessible swings. Language can also be a barrier if children don't understand the communication that's going on. And how guilty are we within churches of using language that we don't understand really? If you can use a long word to say something, it's so much better than using short and easy words, isn't it? What about the expectations of people? Are the children expected to sit in a chair and sit still, for example? I've known a congregation who criticised children for colouring during a service because it made too much noise, the scratching of the pencil on the paper. And that brings us to the fourth, other people. Other people can cause a lot of problems by not understanding the needs of the child, maybe tutting at the behaviours and so on. So what's the key? The key is to get to know the child. This is the way to break down those barriers. You can do it by talking to them, although you may find that difficult if they have communication difficulties. But talk to them, find out what they like, what they don't like. Talk to parents or carers. They will give you a picture of that child. They have very great degree of knowledge. However, I will put a caveat with this one. First of all, parents may have experienced rejection for their child at groups before. They may not want to tell you the absolute truth, because perhaps if you knew the absolute truth, you wouldn't give that child a chance in your group. And secondly, is the problem of guilt. Many parents of children with additional needs have some sense of guilt about their child. So don't be surprised or hurt or annoyed if you don't get the full story from parents. A very good one is to talk to siblings and friends. They will know the child well and they'll have no inhibitions about telling you. And observe that child. See what you can learn about what they like and what they don't like. If they're not verbal, see if you can recognize the sounds that indicate that they're happy or that they're sad. See when they smile. See what they need help with and what they can actually do themselves. And we think about the difference between the medical and the social model of disability. Looking at this picture, the medical model would say, this person has a disability, they need a wheelchair, they won't be able to go upstairs. The social model says, this person could join in with anything that we're doing if they can access it. So maybe we need to look at a lift or a ramp, or maybe we need to hold this event in a downstairs venue. I want to share with you a little moment of video about the experience of a boy with autism. This is a simulation, but it shows very much what that child would experience in something as simple as going into a shopping mall.
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
Some of our children with additional needs can experience things very differently to how we experience them. So tell me about autistic spectrum disorder. The autistic spectrum is diagnosed through a triad of impairments. So many other learning difficulties will entail some aspects of at least one of these. And those three areas that are affected by autism are, first of all, communication. So it may take a long time for the child to process what you're saying to them. They may be seen as uncooperative or unresponsive. They may get very frustrated and easily distressed. And their understanding may be very literal and concrete. They may be unable to read body language, facial expression, tone, etc., all the hidden ways that we communicate. you may have children who show this impairment of communication. And it's going to mean that you're going to need to be very clear and concrete in what you say, and use things that will support your ability to communicate with them. Things like pictures and symbols. We then come to social interaction. Here, the use of language for communication and interaction may be underdeveloped, may be completely lacking. They'll find it difficult to make friends and sustain relationships because they lack the skills. So they may seem to be loners, or they may mix but appear to be a bit odd. Some people believe that children with autism don't want to make friends, that they are naturally withdrawn and loners and happy in their own world. This is not true. The truth of the matter is that they don't know how to do it. They may find it very hard to take turns or work cooperatively, and this is because they don't have a sense of self and others as people with independent feelings or thoughts. And they may struggle to understand emotion, especially in others, but also in themselves. And imagination, and by this I don't just mean creativity, although it does affect creativity. We use our imagination. If we are neurotypical, we use our imagination all the time to work out how things are going to be. I know if I make a sandwich, I know what it'll look like when I've finished. I know if I'm going to a party, I have a mental image of how it will be. Children with an impairment to their imagination may be very rigid in their behaviours and their expectations. They find change and transitions difficult, and they like repetition and routine. It gives structure to the day, and they know what to expect. The things learned in one setting may not be transferred to another setting, so they may learn to use a knife and fork at your group, but they won't necessarily still be able to do that at home or on a picnic or in a restaurant. They may only be able to do it in one place. They may find it difficult to play, especially imaginatively. And they may take everything literally and struggle with creativity. This makes it really important that you don't use lots of idioms with them or joke in a way that could be misinterpreted. As an example, we had a young man who went to school in the morning, and some teacher said to him, "Don't keep drinking water. If you drink too much, you'll pop." And we had a very traumatized 18-year-old actually, who came back to our centre absolutely terrified to drink water because he had visions that he would explode if he drank too much. And why are the senses important? This is a really good question. This applies not only for autism, but for a wide range of learning disabilities. And it's called sensory processing. So we'll start with the obvious question, how many senses do we have? And I bet you're thinking 5, because that's what we're taught about in school. But in fact, we have 7. Visual, auditory, gustatory, which is taste, smell, touch, vestibular, which is balance, and proprioception, which is body awareness. Body awareness means that you're aware of where different parts of your body are in space and in relation to themselves and to other things around them. So an example I would give is, you know, when you get pins and needles and it goes beyond pins and needles to total numbness, you can't actually tell when you put your foot down when it's going to touch the ground. That's proprioception. So do your senses ever cause you a problem? And I bet that they do. Most people have a sort of a synthesizer of different senses. Some will be very astute, some less so. People who have a hyposensitivity to sensory information may display seeking behaviours. They try to seek stimulation that's lacking for them, and it may feel as though their senses are dulled and they need to seek sensory input to stimulate those senses. So we could describe those people as seekers. So can you imagine, some people, I think, seek smell or seek opportunity to try out their balance. People who have a hypersensitivity to certain sensory stimulation will usually display blocking behaviours where they try to block out the stimulation that they find overwhelming. And we could describe those people as avoiders. So let's have a test. I wonder whether you are hyposensitive or hypersensitive to taste. If you're hypersensitive, you may refuse to try new food. You may have a restricted diet and only like certain textures. And you may not like to touch one sort of food to touch another sort of food. This can be really important and can cause a lot of arguments. It's interesting how many dinner ladies think that the child is being silly or fussy and so don't take care how they serve the food, whereas it would take so little to serve that food so that it doesn't touch one another. Hyposensitive may enjoy strong flavours, and you may find that they try to eat inedible things such as grass or Play-Doh. This is called pica. They may stuff their mouth with food to get that sense of a full mouth full of taste. What about smell? If you're hypersensitive, you may become distressed by certain smells, and for example, to refuse to go into a lunch hall when they don't like the smell of the dinner. They may react to people wearing perfumes or to an air freshener in the room because that smell is just too much for them. You may find that they don't respond to a certain volunteer, and it's purely and simply because that volunteer always wears a particular perfume that they can taste. It's so strong to them. If you're hyposensitive, may try to sniff objects and people. They may not seem to notice strong smells, and they're quite lucky because they have their own portable smell dispenser. These are the children who'll have their hands down the back of their pants because they may try to touch their own excrement and then smell their fingers. What about sight? Hypersensitive children may find it easier to look at small details rather than the whole object. They may prefer to look at things through the corner of their eyes, and they might find it difficult to cope with bright or neon lights. Whereas hyposensitive children may have poor depth perception and find it difficult to walk downstairs or catch a ball. They may stand in front of mirrors for a long time. They might like to spin things and watch intently. They will like playing with light toys and things which give them that visual stimulation. Auditory. If they're hypersensitive, they may put fingers in their ears or wear noise-cancelling headphones. There's a lot of debate about noise-cancelling headphones. Some people think they shouldn't use them because they look odd. I would rather that my child was protected than worry about whether or not they look odd to other people. People need to learn to accept the things. You wouldn't say that a deaf child shouldn't wear a hearing aid because they look odd, or that somebody who's unable to walk shouldn't sit in a wheelchair because they look odd. On the other hand, if they wear them too much, they may become desensitized to them, and so they'll still pick up noises, and those lesser noises will still become disruptive to them. So the best thing with headphones is to permit them to use them, encourage them to use them if they need them, but encourage them not to use them when they don't need them. So give warning when things are going to be noisy. Children may dislike certain pitches and find some voices difficult to listen to. If they're hyposensitive, they may enjoy banging things, like making loud noises, making loud music or making sounds. I once taught a young man who had a delight in banging the classroom door, which was a delight to him and not so much to the rest of us. And these children may not respond when you call their name. If they're hypersensitive to touch, they may be overly sensitive to labels or seams in their clothes. They may refuse to wear new clothes. They may find it very uncomfortable to brush their teeth or their hair. They may be tactile defensive and become distressed if asked to touch certain textures or materials, and they may be very averse to being touched. These are the children who will want to take their shoes and socks off. And to be honest, as long as the environment is safe enough, let them. And they'll put their shoes on if you explain that they need to. Also, there may be children who like to take their clothes off. This is more problematic. Perhaps you can ensure that they have something comfortable that they wear when they're at your club. If they do need some time to take their clothes off, encourage them to go into a private space to do that, and then to put clothes on when they come out, maybe just for a breather. If they're hyposensitive, they may have a high pain threshold. They may not notice changes in temperature. They may self-harm to gain tactile input, or they may run their hands over a certain texture repeatedly. These are the children who will need to fidget or fiddle, and you'll need to find something that they can do that with. Vestibular is balance. They may become car sick easily and avoid activities such as swinging or going on a roundabout, and they may become fearful when their feet leave the ground. So you need to make sure that they've got a chair that they can sit on where their feet are on the tough ground, that it's the right height for them. If they're hyposensitive, they may need to rock or spin or flap their hands to stimulate a sense of movement and balance. They may trip easily or not adjust their position when in risk of falling. If they tend to rock on a chair, which obviously does have its risks to it, maybe you could find a chance for them to have a go on a rocker or a rocking chair, something else to get over that need for rocking before they sit on a chair for a few minutes. Proprioception is body awareness. If you're hypersensitive to this, you may have difficulty with fine motor coordination tasks, such as buttoning a shirt. You might not like other people to be in close proximity. And these are the children who may struggle to sit for long. If they want to partake in the activity that the group are doing, but without sitting down, let them. If they need to stand up, if they need to run around, let them, because that's a sensory need for them. A hyposensitive child may like deep pressure, like lying under blankets and cushions. You can set that up. Sometimes, if they find it really hard, they may need you to give them a squeeze, This is a difficult one, obviously, with safeguarding. But if you stand next to them and give them a sideways hug, or if you squeeze their hand in yours, this will be extremely comforting to them. They may prefer to drag a hand along a playground fence and walk around the perimeter rather than walking across an open space. And they may stand too close to other people, seeming unaware of personal space. This is something that I will put into your booklets after the event. This gives us some ideas of the ways that we can meet those sensory needs that our children have. If they are seeking sensory input or avoiding sensory input, this will affect their behaviour and will affect how smoothly your session runs. So this is well worth giving a good read. Stimming. I'm betting that everybody here stims to some extent. I wonder how you stim. I wonder if you bite your nails, or if you twirl your hair around your fingers, or make a moustache with it while you're listening. I wonder if you're one of those people who irritates their family by drumming, or my father used to sit and do this, which really drove me mad. Stimming is perfectly normal. It's a self-soothing behaviour which is often used to regulate sensory input or stress. So it can be a reaction to excitement, it can be a reaction to anxiety, it can be a reaction to concentration. There's all sorts of different ways that people stim. Autistic stimming happens more often and is maybe a little more noticeable. And this is when you'll see people rocking, grinding their teeth, flapping their hands, spinning things. Some people feel that this should be stopped. It should not be stopped and cannot be stopped. Obviously, it's just like nail biting or tapping. It's a subconscious activity which is reacting to stimulus. And the person that it's a problem for is the person who's in the room with it. It's not a problem for the person who's doing it. What about those angry outbursts we know of, especially from children with autism? Well, here is a key to recognising the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. We all know tantrums. People talk of the terrible twos. A tantrum is driven by a want or a goal. Usually it's because they want something. They check that you're paying attention to their behaviour. They act this way in front of an audience. If you take the audience away, the behaviour stops. And once they've got what they want, the behaviour will cease. Should they get what they want? That's a different matter. Because obviously, if you always give in to a child who's having a tantrum, then the child learns that that's a really good way to get what they want. What you actually want to do is to teach them proper ways of, first of all, getting what they need, and secondly, understanding that sometimes they can't have things. A meltdown is very different. That's driven by a reaction to something. It's a reaction to overload or to feeling overwhelmed. They don't care if they get attention or not. In fact, often they'd rather not get attention for it. The behaviour will continue even without an audience. It may get worse with an audience because an audience will increase the sensory overload. There is no goal. The behaviour will only cease once they've calmed down and once a loved one has helped them regain control. Somebody that they trust may be able to help them. But very often what they will need is for you to reduce the sensory overload, Remember that video that we watched at the beginning? That is sensory overload. What they need is for some of that to be taken away. In both cases, what you see will be the same. You will see screaming, kicking, shouting, stomping, swearing, biting, and so on. But the cause and the response are very different. So it's time for our toolkit. What are the things that can help us to plan to make sure that children with additional needs actually belong in our groups and know that they belong? What can make things smooth for them? The first one is relationship. Think back to what we learned yesterday. You are experts in building relationship with children and parents, so use those skills. Join them in their world and enjoy being in their world, especially children with autism. If you've got a child who's non-verbal but makes noises, take some time to mirror those noises back to them. If they stim, take some time to actually do what they're doing. They will love it. They will start by doing it in parallel with you. But as time goes on, they will learn to trust you, and they'll see that you're making the effort to see the world as they see it. It's a lovely way to build relationship. Help them find a buddy. Kids are often much better at supporting others than adults are. They seem to just accept children as they are and understand what they need. Scheduling. We're going to help them know what to expect. One really good way of doing this is with symbols. We tend to go, like the first example on the left, from top to bottom. This is because that's so much easier to scan than going from left to right. If you go from left to right, your eyes get confused with what's each side. But if you're going straight down, there's nothing either side. So make a schedule of what to expect. The center slide image shows us how to do a now and a next, so that a child knows what's happening now and what is going to happen next. Sometimes that's as much information as they need. And when that activity is finished, then we clearly indicate it by saying finished and taking the symbol off and putting it into an envelope or a box. This is a really good way to give children control, and I'm going to say laminating and Velcro is God's gift to scheduling. On the right, you can see a Roman Catholic Mass that shows the stages in the Mass and what children will be, and everybody else will be doing. Here we have another first and then card, which just shows the children basically how long they've got to wait till lunch, if the truth be told. But that then they know that they're doing this for a limited period of time and they can settle to doing it. Timers are also really, really good. Sometimes if it's a timer that ticks and has an alarm, a bell, that's not so good, because the child can become obsessed by listening to the ticks and worrying about the bell. But you can get timers like the one in the center, which will work without ticking and give a clear indication of how long that period of time is. Or sound timers are also really, really useful. And help them know what to do. If there's something they need to do in a sequence, use some symbols which show them what they need to do in order to do that well. Verbal communication. Learn how the child communicates best. Keep your vocabulary clear, concrete and simple. Avoid idioms such as pull your socks up if you don't want the child actually to pull their socks up. Avoid sarcasm and avoid misleading or confusing jokes. Give them time for processing, especially if you're asking a question or giving an instruction. I worked with a young lady with autism who had processing difficulties, and we found that it took 13 seconds for her to process a single word or a couple of words instruction, a single step instruction. 13 seconds, it's a long time, and we rarely give people that amount of time. So if you want them to do something, be prepared to wait. Don't keep saying it again and again. Keep your language positive and remember that they may only register the last thing that you say. Just as we said yesterday with children whose adrenaline is high, children with additional needs may only register the last word. So you're more likely to need to say, be gentle, than to say, stop hitting. Because if they're only going to remember one word, they're either going to remember hitting or gentle. Model good use of language by mirroring back what the child says. Don't sweat the hard stuff. Please and thank you mean more to you than to them. If they're communicating, that is a real plus. You really want that. Don't make it difficult by insisting that they add please and thank you. Don't expect or demand eye contact. Symbol communication is also very important for children with additional needs. We saw them a minute ago with the scheduling. Your synod has access to Widget Online, which is a program that will make symbols. So you can ask your CYW Plus to produce symbols for you. If you label things, it makes it easier for children to request them because they can point. Have a symbol for toilet, drink, and time out easily accessible so that children can get at them and show them to you. To request the toilet, to request a drink, to request some time out. Some children may have what's called a PEX board or other communication board aid. I could show you how to use it, but we'd be here all night. So ask their parents to show you how to use it properly. You can reinforce what they do at home and at school by doing it the same way. You use your symbols for keywords only, and you check that they're the right symbol for what you want to say. So, for example, if you want to say running the country, you don't need a symbol that has a little person with their legs going really fast. You want a very different symbol for running. Some children work better with colour pictures, colour symbols. Some children work better with black and white. And some children work better with photos. So you'll need to experiment to see what works best. Signed communication, Makaton in particular, supports understanding. It's not a language of its own. It's good to learn a few simple signs to enable you to communicate key words. Hello, goodbye, my name is, toilet, wait, come, give, home, sit, more, yes, no. If you can learn those and learn the alphabet so that you can tell them your name, because we sign our names by just using the initials, then that's a real breakthrough. They will really appreciate that you are trying to communicate in the way that works best for them. Always speak at the same time as you're signing, unless the child is in meltdown, when any communication can contribute to overload. Give choices. This is a really good example of a board which shows what a child could do if they're starting to feel a bit wiggly. So maybe they could crawl through the tunnel, do some push-ups, do a job, and so on. If they have choices, then they can use those visual choices to tell you what they want or need to do. And it teaches them to take control themselves of their own regulation of their senses and behaviours. Many children will be learning to recognise their own needs, and sometimes the need is just for some time out. They may not know how to ask for it, and they may feel uncomfortable or embarrassed asking for it. So a card that enables them to opt out for a while is really helpful. And maybe they would need, maybe they're a child who'd benefit from bouncing on a trampoline for a bit in a different room, or sitting inside a dark tent. The senses, we've talked about the senses already. Children may need some activities which stimulate their senses if they are seekers of those sensory input. So things like trays full of pasta or rice or cornflakes or shaving foam, those sort of things may be really useful. And just to say, shaving foam is a funny one. It will end up in people's mouths. And I have to say, I've not known a child yet who's died of it. It's maybe not really very good for them, so you wouldn't encourage it. But don't sweat the small stuff. If they eat it, it's not going to kill them, I don't think. Please don't quote me on that. I will mention Pritt Stick. Keep your Pritt Sticks safe. Keep an eye on them because those apparently taste delicious. I've never tried it, but my teaching assistant did to see what the appeal was. Those will get eaten, and so will many other things. But things to smell, things to touch, all of these things are good for children who are seeking sensory, all these things are good for children who are seeking sensory stimulus. So are fidget toys. These are wonderful things. And it's not only children with additional needs who benefit from them. They're very useful if you have mental health difficulties, if you have anxiety. Things like spinners, clickers, silly string is wonderful. They stretch and bend in all sorts of different shapes. Also, somewhere to get away, somewhere where the stimulus is reduced. You can make your own, or you can buy specialist dark tents for children with autism if they're about £70 for that type of tent, but you can get ones that are much cheaper. And you can also make your own, why not make a wigwam? Of course, other children will want to play in there. And when your child is not experiencing sensory overload, they'll probably cope with other children playing in it. But you need to explain to your children that just sometimes X will need a time in there on their own, and that's okay. Trampoline is really good to have. They're relatively inexpensive. Just make sure that they're very safe and that they're supervised. But sometimes your child will need to have some movement and some up and down movement at that for that vestibular and proprioception sense. Working in steps is also important. We're going to make a collage today. Here's some paper and pencils and just make a collage. And that's really difficult. If a child had sequencing difficulties or autism, the way to do it is to teach one step at a time in reverse. So you would have the paper, the scissors, the magazine pages all cut up, all of this ready. And the stage that they would do, you might even have half of the activity done, half of your collage done, and they would do what they need to do to finish it. Then next time you do it, you can take it back a step, maybe get them to do all of the collaging because they now know what to do. And then the next time you might get them to do the cutting. The time before that, you might get them to choose a page out of the magazine and cut it. If you see what I mean, you're working backwards all the time. Sorry. If they have ADHD, they'll have a slightly different problem because they won't be able to envisage what the steps are and what the end product is going to look like. They can go from the beginning, but they need help to start. And in order to help them start, you need to show them what the steps are. So a sheet like this and the finished article might be all that it needs to help your child with ADHD sit down and complete an activity. Again, they're going to need bouts of exercise. They're going to need bouts of small and easily achieved activities. What's a sensory story? Sensory stories are great fun, and if we were here in real life, I'd be doing one with you. A sensory story includes as many of the senses as possible. It's very short. Keep it about 7 to 10 sentences with simple words. So if you're telling a Bible story, try and identify what the key points in that story are and what bits you can just leave out. Use objects to illustrate the story and let children handle those if you can. Stimulate all the senses. Use colour, use smell, use sound effects, get children moving. And use repetition. The more often they hear this story, the more sense they'll make of it. They'll learn to expect what's coming next. And so more and more of it will be internalised. A social story is something completely different. And this is something that we might use to help children with their behaviour or in understanding how to do something. There are very strict guidelines on how to write a social story that I can't go into here. But the key thing is to keep it short and factual and positive. So, for example, Lorraine likes to play in the play tent. Sometimes other children like to play in the play tent too. Lorraine and the other children can play together. Lorraine can say, "Come in, play with me." Sometimes Lorraine doesn't want to play with other children. Then everyone can take turns. When it's not Lorraine's turn, she can choose trains or Lego. She can use a timer for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, Lorraine can say, "It's my turn now." An adult will help. Everyone can share the play tent and be happy. By reading this story repeatedly with Lorraine, she can learn about the play tent and about sharing and about what her options are when other children are playing in the play tent. It gives her a concrete plan, a concrete strategy of how she can handle that situation. And it ends with a positive. It reminds her that this will make everybody happy. I want to thank you for joining me in this webinar. I hope that it's been of some help to you, given you some ideas of things you can do. I'm very sorry if this were done face-to-face, we'd have done loads and loads of practical activities, and it would also have lasted a lot longer because I'd have been giving you some Makaton and some chance to make some resources too. But for now, I'm hoping that this will help you feel more confident and give you some ideas on how you can approach planning your sessions for children with additional needs. There is some Makaton on our YouTube channel. If you look there, the URC Children and Youth Work YouTube channel, and hopefully you can use that to learn a few words that will be helpful to you. And I wish you every luck. Please feel free to email me if you ever have any questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.